God doesn't want you looking at the church for your income or to build wealth. There are other strategies out there that God wants to bless you with and kind of open your mind up to that, that is not in this natural world of where we got to depend on our paycheck.
Hey, welcome back to the All Access Podcast. My name is Wayne Brown. I'm so glad that you joined us today. Today is going to be a great episode. I encourage you to get a friend and tell them about this podcast. It's going to be awesome. I'm excited about our guest because we're having him back for a second episode. I knew after his first episode that we would have to have him back, and it's JP Caswell. JP is the Chief Financial Officer for Iron Horse Financial, and he's just going to be talking to us about building wealth and how to save and all of that, and it's going to be really, really great. So, JP, thank you for coming back, man.
Thanks, man. I'm so happy to be here. Excited about it.
Pumped about it. I'm pumped about it. Hey, we're going to dive right in because I know people are very concerned about the economy. They're concerned about how much money is in their pockets and really probably about how much money they have saved, right? And I know that this is a passion of yours to not only just help everybody, but really to help pastors, leaders in the church. And so let me just ask you a question, man. So with the way the economy is and the rising of cost of everything, obviously, savings have been really pushed, and future financial planning has been pushed to the back seat. Man, how do we adapt to those needs, and what should we do in this state?
I mean, that's a great question, and I really feel like it's pertinent because the advice has not changed, right? Everything else in our economy, everything else has changed. But the advice that people have always given and always, received as good financial advice, I mean, that's the same that we've had for 50 years, right? And, meanwhile, in the last 50 years, the price of homes, price of cars, price of everything has gone up. Wages, unfortunately, have not. And so, we just keep beating on this horse of, we need to save and pay cash for things. And that's just, for a lot of people, that's not the reality of the world that they live in. And at Iron Horse Financial, one of the things that we specialize in is I don't have account minimums for clients to come in and meet with us, and that's where a lot of people feel like they need to be in a certain situation before they call and sit down with a financial advisor. And for a lot of financial advisors, you do. They have account minimums of $250,000 or more of investable assets before they're going to give you any time of day. And I've always just had more of a passion of helping people, get to that first $1,000. Like, how do I get started? What do I do with this little bit of money I have or I've inherited or what have you? And so, and it's only become more true when we got the inflation that we've had over the last several years. I mean, all of these things, it's not gotten any easier to save. It's not gotten any easier to pay cash for things or get out of debt and, so much that focus. And so there are different strategies that can be done. But, really it's about getting started. It's about taking an assessment of where you're at. And I fully empathize with those initial conversations. I mean, they're coming in, and I just tell most clients, hey, yes, you're 35 years old. You have 2 kids. Of course you have credit card debt. You went to school. Of course you guys did like, yes, that's where you're at. And that's fine. But that we don't want to wait until all those things are gone before we start saving, And so that's really kind of a situation of just assessing where people are at and then really tailoring a plan specifically for them, not just the, traditional plans that have, always been the widely accepted plans. It doesn't necessarily make them right.
That's great. No, and that's one of the things I love about your company and about you because you're very approachable. I know that I've had some young guys that I know personally maybe have come into a little bit of money here or there or starting to come into a little bit. And the first thing that they tell me is like, man, I set up a meeting with JP, or one of your colleagues.
Those.
Yeah.
I love those conversations.
Yeah, young men that are starting to realize that they need to begin to plan and they need to do something with what they're being, what they're coming into. Man, will you take a moment and talk about maybe the 5 steps to building wealth?
Absolutely. And, I've really kind of come up with, I try to simplify it down to just 5 steps because building wealth for a lot of people looks a lot differently. You look at all the different people from entrepreneurs to inherited money, like people build wealth in different ways. But, what are the 5 steps that somebody could do to build wealth? number one is to start with a wealth building account. And before I even move on to the other four, let me just break that down a little bit. Whatever goes into most people, right? I'm going to talk broadly, but I'm going to talk to most of your listeners right now, right? You get your paycheck, and that paycheck is direct deposited into the checking account. That checking account becomes the default account to spend everything, right? And now we're trying to figure out a way to save, to invest, to build wealth. Well, there's generally nothing left over. And so what a wealth building account does is something that I set up for clients that all the income goes into a wealth building account. And therefore our default is to build wealth. And therefore we're just going to transfer over into the checking account that which needs to get spent. That becomes our budget, if you were. And I'm not a big fan of budgets because quite honestly, budgets don't work. Right? I mean, you have kids. Like we can put our kids on a budget because they don't have any unexpected expenses, right? But for us, we're on a budget, and then then it's Christmas time, right? And then it's then it's the car breaks down or whatever. Like things impact the budget to where it's very difficult to try to live on a budget, and I acknowledge that, right? But what we have is what we have, and if we just work to not spend over what we have and what we transfer into that checking account, what happens is with that wealth building account, the money goes into the wealth building account. Over time, let's say that today there's not a dime extra. There's nothing we can save. There's nothing that comes in, right? But over time, the problem is not that people make more money. It's that when they make more money, the lifestyle goes up with it because everything goes into the checking account. And so what a wealth building account does is really just kind of puts a filter in there and to where everything goes into the wealth building account. And I might give myself a little bit of extra, like if I get a raise this next year, right, I might give myself a little bit of a raise, but I'm not giving myself all of that raise. I'm continually siphoning off more and more money. And so over time, let's say that somebody starts this and they're 30 years old, over 30, 35 years, the default is always going to be in that wealth building account. And over time, I've, increased my cost of, my standard of living a little bit, but it didn't go up nearly as much as what my income went up. And that's where really people run into trouble is, they're 50 years old, they make a lot more money than they did when they're 30, but their lifestyle is, the same, right? They're still saving 2% of their money or what have you. And so really that first step is having that wealth building account to make sure that that savings and investing becomes the primary, right? Spending is then therefore secondary and is done intentionally and not just by default. And then the second point there is really to kind of protect those assets. I have clients of all walks of life with all stages of life, and therefore things happen in life. And I was just on the phone this week with a client who is going through a lawsuit and actually just lost the lawsuit, to be full disclosure. And it's tough. It's incredibly very much of a setback. And so if I, on the front end of those things, can really help protect those assets, again, what happens if we get sick? What happens if we get sued? What happens if, somebody passes away prematurely or there's a disability? Like as we protect those assets, as we are building wealth, these threats that can surprise us later, can be mitigated, right? And so the third step there is to find an investment vehicle that they're comfortable with, that they're excited about. Right? When people sit down with me, a lot of times they come in, they're like, I need to get out of debt. I got credit cards. And, I want to change the conversation up with them. I want to change that conversation where instead of us focusing on, try to, spending extra, every penny that comes in, I'm sending off towards debt. Like, what would you do if you had $1,000? Right? What would you do if you had $10,000? That's what I want my clients and I want people and your listeners to be thinking about. Instead of, again, we're so bombarded with debt. We've had all of these entertaining financial advisors that are out there just get out of debt, get out of debt, get out of debt. That's all they focus on. And it's just such a burden to people where I feel like, God wants them to drive around and go like, all right, how do I want to bless you? If I had $1,000, where would I put it? If I had $10,000, what would I get excited about? And that can be, obviously I'm a wealth manager, so I deal with a lot that is in the stock market, and that is a great investment vehicle for people. But it's not the only investment vehicle, right? Some people like real estate. Some people like crypto. Some people are entrepreneurs. They want to build a business. I just want somebody to be excited about something. Like, what is it that God has put in you that you feel like can be a blessing to bring value to others to where this could be that investment vehicle for you? And then let's figure out how to get more into that. Again, over time, the debt's going to take care of itself. Let's face it, everybody ends up out of debt. You're not paying your grandparents' debt, and I'm not paying my grandparents' debt. Like we all end up out of debt, but not everybody builds wealth. And I want your listeners and I want my clients to really focus on what are we doing to build wealth. And if I build enough wealth, the debt's going to take care of itself. It's going to go away anyway, right? It might be upon death, but it's going to go away. But what I do to build wealth is where I can have a lasting impact and a legacy in my family and then on the next generation. And so, again, finding that investment vehicle is the third step, and then really surrounding yourself with successful people. And it's almost simplified. We all accept the fact that that we need to surround ourselves with successful people. But Jim Rohn said that your income will average that of your 4 closest friends. Wow. And if you add up the people that the people that you spend the most time with, you're going to be comfortable at an income level that other people are at, right? And if you have to be intentional. If you're, at an age where you've been in this comfort zone for a little while, you're going to have to be intentional about putting yourself into other circles that have more successful people that are going to be talking about different things that they're doing, that they're investing in. Somebody who has a great deal of wealth and is, considered a rich person, right? They're not going to make other people feel uncomfortable generally, right? By coming in and saying what they did this weekend, right?
Sure.
We took the private jet up to Montana.
Right.
They're not going to have that conversation with somebody that's not in that same circle, right? And so you need to be a little bit uncomfortable by putting yourself in some circles where that's the conversations that are being had. And what are they talking about? And what are they invested into? And eventually, you will see opportunities. You'll see yourself comfortable in that circle, and opportunities will present themselves to you as well.
That's so good. I think oftentimes we think about that in ministry because we pastors and leaders are constantly trying to get around those who are maybe would be what we would deem maybe a little bit more successful in ministry. Maybe their churches are a little bit bigger, what have you. And so we try to get in those circles in those arenas, but we never think about it financially.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is so important because if you're around those who think bigger or think higher, you will begin to think that way as well. So that's really, really good. I can talk about that for a whole nother podcast.
But I'm telling you, it is, it's something that has to be intentional because we all kind of fall into that where these are the people I'm comfortable with. These are the people, and especially if you're one that, is on the higher end of the people that you hang out with and you're taking care of them and you can feel really good about yourself, but you're not going anywhere, right? You're not going up to that next level, and you got to put yourself a little bit uncomfortable around those that, that make a little bit more money and see what are they doing with it.
Sure. That's great. That's fantastic. What's number 4?
That's number 4.
That was number 4, yeah.
Surround yourself with successful people. Number 5 would be have a growth mindset. And this is one where, everybody wants to say that they've got a growth mindset because they, pick up a new hobby and now they've dove into it and, therefore they're growing. I think it's more than that. I think it is one where you have to be very intentional on learning about finances, learning about the other opportunities that are out there. And if your investment vehicle is, real estate, for example, or again, crypto, the stock market, but just kind of educating yourself and then trying to get better, trying to be around better people, be around people that are growing, be around people that are moving somewhere, but really kind of have that overall vision for your life. I feel like, people who have those goals in life, oftentimes are moving towards those, and we all want to tell ourselves that we have a growth mindset, but, do you? Are you?
Right. Sure.
If we look back a year, 2 years, 3 years, have you moved forward? Like, what does that actually look like? And having that intentionally in your financial world is something that is very important.
That's fantastic. I was talking with a young man yesterday. He's in his early 20s, and one of the things we were just talking about was about growth. And he says, I want to grow. I want to get better. And I said, well, what do you want to grow in? And it was like, well, I just want to get better in life as a whole. Well, I said, well, you have to begin to become clear on what it is, set some milestones, begin to line out exactly what that looks like, because we can all say we want to grow, but what does that look like? And really being able to write down and be able to determine and have clarity on where you want growth at, in what areas, intellectually, financially, whatever that may be. And I know this sounds super simple, but oftentimes we can have a growth mindset, but we're not clear in how we want to grow.
100%.
Does that make sense?
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that that's important, and so I would encourage any listener that's listening today to really gain some clarity and say, hey, what does that look like? How do I want to grow in that? There's some pastors that are probably listening to today, and some leaders, some people that are in ministry, and I think oftentimes people have unique challenges in their finances as pastors, and maybe they may think to themselves, hey, if you want to be rich, don't get into ministry. Okay. But what are some of the common issues that you're seeing being faced with pastors and leaders?
So, I mean, this is a great question, because this is something that I've become just incredibly passionate about, right? So my father-in-law is a pastor. I've seen what he's gone through, and I understand there's a lot that goes into the finances of a pastor, right? You got the politics, first of all, just of the church, because there's 2 or 3 financial advisors in the church, so you can't use this one or that one. So so over time, I've really just got to where I specialize in business owners and pastors and ministries, and there's some commonalities that I see there. I'm going to give a couple of pitfalls as well. Number one, I don't encourage people to cancel their Social Security. Right. I know that as a minister, you can cancel your Social Security. The only time that I think that is yes, over time, if you set that money aside, it's going to make more money than this. We all get that. Right. But what I see is a lot of pastors who didn't do the other, right? They didn't do step 2.
That's right.
They canceled Social Security. Now, as an advisor, I got to try to replace that. And that gets really difficult, right? And so if you've already opened up a Roth, you've been putting it into it since college, and you're consistent that this is what you do, then cancel your Social Security, you're going to be way better off. If you haven't done that, then don't, right? Just, quick advice, especially for some of the young associate pastors and those that are getting ordained out there, just kind of consider that. Number 2 is don't choose your financial advisor because they're Christian. I think I run into a lot of issues out there where, I'm trying to look at a 403B that a church has, and yes, it's being managed by some company that is Christian in the name or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're any good at what they do, right? So just there's on my team, I have an attorney and a CPA that I work with closely that is focused on ministers, and they have ministers in all states, and we understand the laws of different states and what can be done, and you really have to have a Christian ministry focused CPA and advisor for a lot of churches. But the financial advice, a lot of times the financial advisor was trained at, name any name, right, of the financial advisor companies. They were trained there, and they're just taking that advice and then bringing it into the church world. And yes, they're Christian and they mean well and all those kind of things, but their advice is not necessarily catered towards what a pastor needs. Yes. And what a pastor needs, and I'm going to kind of speak broadly here, but just kind of from some past experiences as well. When I'm working with a pastor, I want to know, especially if it's a senior pastor, what is that relationship with a board, right? If it's your church, you started it, like my father-in-law who mortgaged his house to buy the church, property and all that kind of stuff. Like there's some control there, which makes me and my team a little, feel a little bit more comfortable as we're throwing out suggestions. But I get really nervous if that pastor was hired by a board and could be fired at any time as well.
Sure.
Right. And so, all those kind of things play into it, especially when we're talking about compensation and, how do we negotiate that compensation? I generally try to do the board meeting for the pastor, so the pastor is not going to the board and asking for a pay raise or what have you. We can run a comparison study as to what a pastor that is in this state with this size church and this, what should they be being compensated? And oftentimes, if a pastor listening to this feels like they're not being compensated appropriately, right? Because it is well overlooked. Pastors aren't, expected to make money anyway, and they're not expected to complain about it. And so, many times it's overlooked. It's a conversation that I don't mind to bring up and have for the board. And a lot of times we discover that, there is, there should have been other, compensation increases over time. They weren't there. So instead of just, ignoring that and starting now, one example of what we could do is to maybe, go back and calculate what past income could have been there, should have been there, and negotiate that with the board to say, let's apply this to my deferred comp. So after I retire, this money that's been left on the table the last 5 or 6 years, I would like that to be spread out over the 5 years post retirement. That way you're not putting an undue burden on the church right now to stroke you an extra check or give you a raise. But there's a lot of other things that can be done if we really step back, kind of look outside of the box as to what strategy comes in here. Because quite honestly, that's where it comes into it. It really comes down to strategy. The idea that you're going to work for 30 years, retire, and then live off your savings for the next 30 years. A lot of pastors are listening to this going, well, that ship's already sailed.
Right.
I don't have another 30 years left to work, and I don't have the 30 years. So if that ship has sailed, then what do we do? And that's where strategy comes in there. And that's just something where every church is unique. The board, whether or not they have a successor, what that exit strategy looks like, all those things come into play. I'm really good at figuring out what those strategies might be optimal for that particular pastor.
Absolutely, man. I love this. This content is so good. What you're saying is so great, and I know there's some pastors that are listening to this. Man, it reminds me of when you spoke at our All Access Refresh event last year, and on one of our panels, and which that is actually coming up again in 2025. Refresh is back March 31st and 1st, and Iron Horse has been one of our sponsors and will continue to connect with us. And I'm not sure, I'm not even putting JP there. I don't know what his schedule's like, but I'm sure he would love to connect with pastors and be there to help them, because I know as you're hearing what he's saying, you're thinking, man, I need to connect with somebody like that. And so I want to encourage you, come to All Access Refresh. It's going to be in NOLA. You can go to BethanyAllAccess.com and sign up for that. But so many good things are happening. We have mission trips and all of that. But man, this is such good information. Let me ask you this. Oftentimes when we talk about financial planning, we talk to, and I'm sure that the ideal person is a young person in their late 20s, early 30s, right, to get started. What happens to, and I'm sure you've dealt with this, to a pastor who's listening to this right now, and they're past that season, right? They're thinking to themselves, like you said, man, I'm that ship has sailed, and I'm in my 40s, I'm in my 50s, and I haven't done what I need to do. What would you tell a pastor, and how would you get them started?
Well, again, every situation is unique, right? And this goes for pastors and other people. And I want to look at that. I want to look at the full picture and just really, quite honestly, let's just have a conversation. And many times it really does. And I have clients that are very young, and I have clients that are currently in retirement, and depending each year on the decisions that we make to make sure that they don't outlive their money. Right? And so really kind of having all spectrums of that, we need to look at that situation. But let me give you an example. That it's not necessarily about how much money you save. It's about what kind of income that you can draw off of that, right? And so as I'm looking at somebody getting closer to retirement, I want to see what is their guaranteed income coming in, right? Do they have a pension plan? Generally not. But do they have that? Do they have Social Security? And then what other income can we count on? And let's say somebody needs to replace, $6,000 a month with of their income, right? Well, if Social Security is $2,500 of that. Then now I only have to replace $3,500 a month. That gets a little bit easier, right? So what do I need to, I can try to have $1 million account and then draw 4% off of that, and I'm there and I'm golden forever. Well, that may or may not work, right? But for most people, how do I get to the $1 million? Might not be there, right? So what if we shorten that gap up? A lot of people there are now, the kids are starting to move out of the house. Potentially, that's when they start thinking retirement. Right. Unfortunately, right? I'm getting there myself as getting close to 50, and now it's like, oh man, this is not that far away, right? Right. If there's opportunities there, for example, I have one client, let's potentially downsize the house, right? But instead of downsizing the house, and what a lot of people do when they go to buy the next house is they put all the down, one great thing about inflation, right, is if you own your home, the value of that home has gone up, right? You have equity now in that home, right? So that gives us a little bit of options. And if downsizing is what you want to do, instead of going to buy the bigger, nicer house or the house that's, closer to town or the more expensive house, maybe we just buy another similar type of home, right? But we keep the home that we're in. We take the equity from the home that you're in now, use that to purchase the second home, and pay down both of those mortgages to where by the time we get to retirement, now both of those are paid down. We're renting out the other house. But we do that, and now we get into retirement. We got the Social Security $2,500 a month. We got rent at $2,500 a month. And now we only need a fraction of that savings to make up the difference.
That's great. That's great. No, that's a great strategy. I love that. I know that there are people that are listening and are thinking to themselves, man, I need a strategy.
Yeah.
I need a
I tell you what,
plan.
people, we talk about peace of mind. Peace of mind is having a plan. It's the burden of man, I've got this debt and I'm looking to the church and God doesn't want you looking to the church for your income or to build wealth. There are other strategies out there that God wants to bless you with and kind of open your mind up to that is not in this natural world of where we got to depend on our paycheck, right? It's not just the church, it's any other kind of job that you'd have. There are other things that you can do to take control of that. And I'm just kind of giving you a couple of examples because I want the mind to start working, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And your particular situation might be different than everybody else's, and that's fine. Call me, let's have a conversation about it. But there is a way, right? There is a plan. There is time. As long as you're still drawing income, you can we're still in good shape.
Yeah, absolutely. People have debt for many reasons, right? And for whatever that may be, and oftentimes people will think that there's no way to build wealth and to pay down debt at the same time. Is that possible?
Yes, it's 100% possible. And,
wow.
And this is where, we all feel the pressure of debt, especially when there's no plan, right? And all we want to do is just get rid of this debt. We want to get rid of this debt. And therefore it gets prioritized in the wrong place oftentimes, right? And so, yes, if your debt is there because you have a shopping problem, you have a gambling problem,
right.
you're in an apartment leasing your car and you got a Louis Vuitton purse.
Mm-hmm.
There's some advisors out there that you probably need to be taking some of their somewhat condescending advice
right.
when it's given.
Right.
You probably need to be listening to them.
Sure.
But for a lot of people, I want to see what the debt is. And are we continuing to go into debt on a weekly basis? But a lot of times, we had this kid, we had a job loss, we had a health issue, we had, there's a lot of reasons why we've gone into this debt, and we need to obviously kind of work on that and structure the debt correctly and make sure that we're not going into debt. But the idea that you should get out of debt before you start saving, man, I've got too many clients that I talk to that took that advice that they're trying to get out of debt and every spare dollar going to getting out of debt, and to the point where their kids don't go to birthday parties, right? Nobody gets anything for Christmas, or we all make each other's gifts at home, or my wife's driving an old hoopty car. I'm not that advisor, right? I'm not telling you to do any of those kind of things. I want people to live. I want people to be reasonable, but I want people to start early on building debt, on building wealth. Yeah. Even at the expense of trying to get out of debt. Compound interest, this magical thing about compound interest, it really only works with time, right? You need a lot of time. My kids all have investment accounts, and when they get their report card money, they can put a little bit of that into their investment account. Right? They've already got that started up. Why? Because I'll give you an example of Warren Buffett that we talk about. Warren Buffett's worth all these billions of dollars. Well, 90 years of compound interest. If you look at how much of that money was made after he turned 65, that's where it really gets just, ridiculous. And so, again, compound interest really only works if you have the time to let it work. And so that needs to be done at the same time that again, it's different if I'm talking to somebody that is, every month still using the credit cards to just get through, diapers and formula, right? We've got some income issues that we got to deal with. But if you haven't added new credit card debt in the last couple of years, you're just kind of it's still there and you haven't got it paid off yet, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Let it be there. And let's get to building wealth, because that's going to be the priority over time.
Love it. Man, time has flown. This has been awesome, JP. This has been so good, and I'm loving it. I think we're going to have you back for a part 3, man, because this has been so great. I know somebody's probably out there going, I need to speak with him, or somebody on his team. Man, how can they get in contact with you and your team?
Iron Horse Financial, ironhorse-financial.com is our website. Feel free to reach out. My phone number, 225-766-9700. We're in Baton Rouge right here in Perkins Rowe, right above the movie theater. Just walk in, say hi to us, meet the team. Would love to spend some time with you, but you can also email me. I'm pretty easy to find, social media, what have you. So feel free to reach out, and I'd love to talk to you. And for some of the pastors that are out there, let's just have a conversation, right? Or if you're a listener, you don't even have to be a pastor, but let's just have a conversation. Let's see where you're at, and then see if a strategy meeting is needed. And I want to know your situation. I want to know if I can be helpful at all. And that's what I'm so passionate about doing.
Yeah, that's where it all starts. It just starts with a conversation and just seeing where you're at. And that's the one thing I love about JP. JP is a real approachable person, and who he is what you get, and he's awesome. And so I would encourage any one of you to contact him, contact his team, and begin to connect, and really begin to, if not JP, somebody, and begin to develop a plan.
Absolutely.
And because it's important. You don't have to live a life that's not prosperous. God called us to live prosperous, and I believe that the Lord wants us to do
Amen
that.
to that.
Hey, I want to encourage you. Thank you for joining us today. I want to encourage you again. If you're a pastor and you want to come to All Access Refresh, you can come to it. It's going to be March 31st through April 1st, and it's going to be in our NOLA campus, and we'd love to see you in NOLA. Hey, thank you again for joining us, and we'd love to see you next time. God bless.